The battlefield was quiet now, but the silence felt heavy. Smoke rose from burning alien tanks, and broken weapons lay scattered on the ground. Human Commander Jake moved carefully between the fallen bodies. His rifle ready, he had seen too many. Tricks to trust a quiet battlefield. Suddenly, his boot hit something soft. He looked down and saw her. She was not human, but not fully alien either. Silver skin shimmered under her broken armor, and violet eyes stared at him, wide with fear. Her body was covered in bruises, and her arm was bleeding badly. She tried to sit up, but collapsed, coughing. Jake raised his rifle instinctively, aiming straight at her head. "Don't move," he warned, voice cold and steady. But she didn't attack, didn't even reach for a weapon. Instead, she whispered, voice shaking, "Don't kill me, human, please." "I surrender." Jake hesitated, finger tight on the trigger. He had heard these creatures were ruthless, trained to die before capture. So why was this one begging?
Oh.
Other soldiers walked up behind him, weapons ready. "Is she alive?" one asked barely. Jake replied, eyes still on her. "She's the enemy, sir. Just finish her off." The soldier said, but Jake didn't shoot. There was something in her eyes, fear. Yes, but also sadness and something close to hope. Jake looked around, saw no threat, and finally lowered his gun. He took a breath, then knelt beside her. "What's your name?" he asked, voice quieter now. She swallowed hard, then said Kylara. Her voice was soft, her words slightly broken but understandable. Jake reached for his cum device. "HQ, I've got a live prisoner, alien female, sending coordinates." As they waited for the transport, Kylara sat with her head down, not speaking. Jake noticed she didn't try to escape, didn't fight. Instead, she looked tired. Not like a soldier caught by the enemy, but like someone who had lost everything and didn't care anymore. The wind blew dust across the field, mixing with the smell of fire and metal. Jake looked at her again, still unsure of sparing. Her was the right move. Back at base, Kylara was locked in a small room with force fields. Jake stood outside the transparent wall, watching her sit silently in the corner. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't normal. Aliens like her were elite warriors trained. Proud, unbreakable. But she looked like a ghost he needed answers. Later that night, Jake entered the cell with a tray of food. She didn't look up as he placed it down. "You need to eat," he said. "I don't deserve food," she murmured. Jake frowned. "Why did you surrender?" Kylara looked up slowly, her eyes glowing faintly in the low light. "Because I was tired of killing, and I thought maybe you'd show mercy." Jake didn't respond at first. He had seen so many lies, so many traps. But her words didn't feel like a trick. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him again. "If you keep me alive, I'll do anything. I'll warm your bed. Just don't give me to the others." Jake froze. Shocked by what she had just said, he looked over his shoulder, meeting her eyes. She wasn't smiling, wasn't seducing. She was pleading like someone who had no dignity left to hold on to. "I'm not like that," Jake said quietly. "I know." Kylara whispered, "But I needed to say it, just in case." Then she turned her face away, her shoulders shaking slightly. Jake walked out, confused, troubled, and with far too many questions, outside the cell. One of the guards smirked. "Commander, keeping a pet now?" Jake didn't answer. He just kept walking through the dim corridor, mind racing. Was Kylara broken beyond repair? Or was this just another game? Why was she so different from the other alien soldiers? Why did he care so much? That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about those violet eyes, the way her voice trembled, and the strange feeling in his chest, like he had just opened a door he couldn't close again. The war still raged outside the base. But for Jake, the real battle had just begun with a prisoner who didn't act like an enemy, and a choice that could cost him everything. Kylara's wrists were bound in glowing cuffs, her ankles chained with gravity locks. She sat on the cold metal floor of the human outpost's holding cell, head bowed low. The collar around her neck hummed softly, suppressing her alien abilities. Outside the force field, human Commander Jake watched her from a distance. Arms crossed, he had seen prisoners before, angry ones, proud ones, even monsters, but never someone like her. Every time he visited, she didn't scream, didn't curse, didn't beg. She only looked at him with tired eyes, as if waiting for something. One morning, Jake entered the cell without his rifle. Carrying only a datapad, "I need answers," he said, voice firm but not unkind. Kylara didn't move, didn't speak. "I saved you," he continued. "Don't make me regret it." Finally, she raised her head, slowly, carefully, like even that motion hurt. Her voice was quiet, then "Ask your questions." Commander Jake knelt down, placing the datapad between them, these battle maps. "You were part of the enemy's command unit, right?" Kylara nodded, barely. "I wasn't just part of it," she said. "I led entire raids against human colonies." Jake tensed, but didn't move away. "Then why surrender? Why not die with your soldiers?" Kylara's face twisted for a moment, like something deep inside cracked. "They weren't my soldiers," she whispered. "They were hostages too, like me." Jake stared at her, stunned. She explained in short, broken sentences. Her empire forced young warriors into service, planted explosive trackers into their bodies. One wrong move, and they'd be detonated. Her family had been taken as leverage. Her life was not her own. "I killed because I had to," she said. "Not because I wanted to." Jake didn't trust easily. But her voice didn't sound like a lie. Still, it was risky. "You expect me to believe that?" he asked, testing her. Kylara looked him straight in the eye. "No," she replied softly. "I expect you to keep me alive long enough to prove it." The next day, Jake brought her real food, not ration blocks, but warm bread and protein. Stew, she hesitated before eating, like she thought it might be poisoned. When she finished, she whispered, "Thank you." Without looking at him, Jake sat down on the bench outside her cell. His gaze steady. "I can't keep protecting you without something in return," he said. Kylara lifted her head again, something shifting behind her eyes. "What do you want?" she asked, voice cautious. "Intel," Jake said. "I want everything you know, locations, fleet movements, command structures." Kylara didn't speak for a long time. Then she nodded. "I'll give you what I know," she said, "but only if you make me a promise." Jake raised an eyebrow. "A promise?" "Yes," she said, her voice shaking, "that you won't hand me over to the other humans. Ever." Jake didn't reply immediately. He knew what the higher command would do with her interrogation. Torture, experiments, but making a deal with an enemy could destroy his career. Maybe even land him in prison. Still, something inside him may be that small. Stubborn piece of humanity made him speak. "Fine," he said. "You give me real information, and I'll protect you." Kylara nodded once, and then something strange happened. For the first time since her capture, she smiled, in a big smile, but a soft, sad one, that night. As Jake sat outside her cell, reading the intel she gave him, Kylara moved to the edge of her cot. Through the glowing field, she spoke just above a whisper. "You kept me alive," she said, "and I haven't felt safe in years." Jake looked up, surprised. Then she added, "If you want, I can stay in your quarters instead of this cage." Jake froze, unsure of what she meant. Kylara seemed to notice his discomfort and clarified. "Not for your bed, Commander. Just somewhere warm, where no one looks at me like I'm a monster." Jake didn't say yes, and he didn't say no. He simply watched her as she lay back down, her chains clinking quietly with each small movement. For a prisoner, she had given him more than he expected, but in return, he had accepted a silent responsibility, one that could shatter everything he believed in. Outside, the war still raged, but inside that cell, a strange alliance had begun. One built not on orders or duty or threats, but on a quiet deal between two broken warriors who no longer saw each other as enemies. The next morning, Jake unlocked Kylara's cell himself. No guards, no cameras, just him and her in that silent hallway. She looked at him with tired eyes, expecting another round of questions or orders, but instead, he simply said, "Walk." With me, Kylara hesitated, her cuffs still on, her steps slow and uncertain. Jake led her down the corridor, past rows of empty cells and blinking lights. He didn't speak until they reached a small storage room that had been cleared out and turned into a private space. There was a bedroll, a heater, and a chair. Nothing more. This is yours now, Jake said. No more cold floors. Kylara stared in silence, unsure if it was a trap. Why? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake looked at her, calm but firm. You gave me intel no one else could and it checked out, he said. That earned you this. She stepped inside slowly, brushing her fingers along the soft bedroll like it was something sacred, for the first time in years. She had her own space, not a cell, not a battlefield, not a cage. It's just a place where she could breathe. But peace didn't come easily, not for someone who had lived in chains. For so long, that night Kylara couldn't sleep. Even the quiet felt like a threat, too unfamiliar, too soft. She sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, eyes open and alert like a hunted animal the next day. Jake returned with coffee in silence. He didn't press her, didn't ask anything, just sat across from her after a few sips. Kylara finally spoke. You want secrets, right? She asked. Jake nodded. Kylara closed her eyes, exhaled slowly, began to speak. Not like a soldier, but like a survivor. She told him about the Neural Dome, a hidden alien command center buried beneath the Korthon Mountains. It was shielded from satellites and guarded by machines that couldn't be bribed or fooled. Your generals don't know it exists, she said, because no one who saw it ever returned. She described how her people were not all loyal to the Empire. Some were rebels, hiding in shadows, hoping to someday speak with humans in peace. But they were hunted down, executed for even whispering about diplomacy. Jake listened carefully, taking mental notes. This wasn't just intellect, was truth soaked in pain. When she spoke about the experiments, his fists clenched. Alien scientists had tested new weapons on their own soldiers, including her. That's why her left arm never fully healed. Jake looked at the scar on her skin, a jagged burn running from elbow to wrist. She covered it quickly, ashamed, but Jake didn't flinch, didn't look away. You're not a weapon, he said quietly. Kylara's lips trembled, but she didn't cry not yet later while reviewing her data logs. Jake presented her with one more question. There's something strange in your story, he said. If you were a prisoner in your own army, why didn't you escape sooner? Kylara looked away, her voice small, because I thought no one would believe me, and if I ran, it'd kill my sister. That named sister hung in the air like a ghost. Kylara hadn't mentioned family before. Not once. Jake leaned forward, speaking softer now. Is she still alive? Kylara nodded slowly. As far as I know, yes, but they're using her as bait. Jake stood up. Pacing the room, he knew what this meant. Rescuing her sister meant crossing into enemy territory. Too dangerous, too risky, but before he could reply, Kylara looked up and said, I'll go alone if I have to, but I won't leave her there. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a request. It was a truth born of desperation and loyalty. Jake sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. You're not going alone, he said finally. We'll figure something out that night. She didn't return to her corner of the room. She lay down on the bedroll. Watching the ceiling like it might collapse at any moment, Jake passed by her door once, paused and looked in. She saw him, didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. Thank you for not seeing me as a monster in the days that followed. The bond between them grew quietly, like a flame hidden from the wind. She gave more intel. He brought her better meals. They spoke not just of war, but of stars, old legends, and strange human habits. She asked why humans put flowers in graves, and he asked why her people sang during battle. Each question brought them closer. Not as commander and prisoner, but as two broken souls trying to understand each other, and yet danger still lurked outside the door. If anyone discovered how close they had grown, everything would be over for both of them. Asterisk rain fell hard on the metal rooftops of Outpost Kilo 7. The sky was gray, and the ground was soaked with red mud and scattered shell fragments. Inside the command center, Jake stood still, surrounded by silence and flickering monitors. He stared at the holographic message on the screen, an urgent order from High Command. Transfer alien prisoner Kylara to Black Site 12 for advanced interrogation. Effective immediately, he clenched his jaw, reading the message again, hoping the words would change, but they didn't. Jake knew what Black Site 12 meant. No trials, no questions. Just endless pain and death behind cold steel walls. No one ever returned from there, not even human prisoners. They would tear Kylara apart for what she knew. And even if she told them everything, they would never trust her, not after what she was, not after what she had done, but if he disobeyed, he would be labeled a traitor. Traitors didn't get second chances, not in wartime. Jake leaned against the wall. Rainwater dripping from his uniform, his mind racing. He thought of her voice, soft and scared, whispering about her sister. He thought of her trembling hands, the scars, the nights she flinched at loud sounds. She wasn't just an enemy prisoner anymore. She was someone real. The door behind him slid open. Lieutenant Reed entered with a smirk, holding a stun baton. "So," Commander Reed said, "you want me to prep the transport for the monster girl?" Jake didn't respond immediately. Reed continued, "Can't believe you've been feeding her real meals. You going soft or what?" Jake's fists curled, but he kept calm. "She's more valuable alive than dead," he said flatly. Reed laughed. "Yeah. Well, not for long. Once Site 12 gets their hands on her. She won't be alive for much." Jake turned sharply, his voice cold now. "I'll handle it myself, Lieutenant." Reed raised an eyebrow but nodded and left. Jake stood alone again, the echo of his own footsteps louder than before. He had less than 6 hours before the transport shuttle arrived, and only one question that truly mattered: was he willing to risk everything to save her? Back in her small room, Kylara sat with a drawing tablet Jake had given her. She wasn't drawing weapons or maps, but something softer, a flower she saw in the outpost garden. She had never drawn before, but the motion soothed her mind. Door opened, and Jake entered without a word. His face was tight, jaw clenched, eyes unreadable. Kylara looked up, sensing something was wrong. "What is it?" she asked softly. Jake tossed a small bag on the bedroll. "Pack what you can." Now, Kylara froze. "They're coming, aren't they?" Jake nodded, not looking at her. "They ordered your transfer to a black site. I can't stop it unless you vanish." Her voice shook. "You mean run?" Jake finally met her eyes. "Yes, and I'll help you do it." She stood slowly, unsure. "If this was another test, but if they catch you helping me, I know what I'm doing." He cut in. "I've already made my choice." Kylara didn't speak for a long moment, then nodded. "Then I have to tell you something," she said. "Something no one else knows." Jake stared at her, confused. Kylara stepped closer, placing a small chip in his hand. "This contains the location of my sister and the main code to shut down the neural dome. The command center I told you about?" Jake's breath caught. "You're giving this to me now?" She nodded. "Because if I die, I want this war to end. And if I live, I want my sister saved." Jake looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Not as a soldier, not as a prisoner, but as a person who had lost more than he could imagine. "We leave in 20 minutes, he said. Through the maintenance tunnel under the barracks, Kylara nodded, quickly gathering what little she owned. No weapons, no armor, just a blanket, the drawing pad, and the tiny silver pendant. She always hid beneath her collar, the symbol of her sister's birthmark. Etched into it like a fading memory, outside, the storm grew stronger, lightning splitting the sky above the outpost. As Jake and Kylara crept through the tunnel, sirens suddenly blared. Prisoner breach detected. "Lockdown in progress," the computer announced. Jake cursed under his breath. "They found out faster than I thought." Kylara grabbed his arm, eyes fierce now. "Then we run faster." Their footsteps echoed in the steel tunnel, guards scrambling behind them, voices shouting. They didn't look back. They couldn't afford to, for Jake. This was no longer about orders, no longer about war. It was about choosing what kind of man he wanted to be, and for Kylara, it was the first time someone ran with her instead of after her. The tunnel shook as an explosion echoed behind them. Flames lit the dark corridor for a split second before shadows took over again. Jake grabbed Kylara's wrist and pulled her forward, heart pounding like war drums. Boots thundered behind. Them human soldiers shouting, closing in. Kylara stumbled, still weak from days of captivity, but she didn't stop. She knew this was her only chance, her only moment of freedom after a lifetime of chains. Left now, Jake shouted, turning sharply into a maintenance shaft. Kylara followed, nearly slipping on the slick metal floor. A blast door slammed shut behind them just in time, sealing off the soldier's path, but the clock was still. Ticking security would override the doors in minutes. Jake led her through a cramped crawl space, too narrow for weapons. Their breaths were loud in the tight space, every second thick with panic and hope. "Why are you doing this?" Kylara asked, gasping as they crawled. Jake didn't answer right away, not because he didn't have one, but because it was hard to explain. After a few seconds, he replied, "Because I believe you deserve more than a cage." They emerged into a dim utility room at the edge of the outpost. Beyond the broken window was the open night end, the wild jungle of planet Theron 5. Rain poured hard, thunder rolled in waves, and giant alien trees swayed like sea creatures. Kylara stared out, eyes wide. "No lights, no patrols," she whispered. "We might have a chance." Jake handed her a cloak and pulled his pistol from its holster. "I'll hold off anyone who follows. You run for the tree line." Kylara looked at him sharply. "No, I'm not leaving you behind." Jake gave a short smile. "That's not how this works." Then, without warning, he opened the door, and they ran together into the storm. Gunfire burst behind them, slicing through the rain. Bullets slammed into trees and dirt, sparks flying as metal met rock. Jake returned fire, covering their path while Kylara sprinted through the undergrowth. Her legs burned, her heart raced, but she kept moving. Branches slashed her skin. Mud clung to her feet, but she didn't stop. She glanced back only once and saw Jake diving behind a boulder, still firing. "Come on," he shouted. "Keep going." She turned her head forward again and vanished into the trees. 15 minutes later, deep within the jungle, she waited beneath a thick root arch. The forest was loud with alien wildlife, glowing insects floating in the air like stars. Every sound made her jump. Every rustle could be a soldier, or worse. Then, suddenly, a shape emerged from the darkness. Jake, soaked and panting, collapsed beside her. "You made it," she whispered. Voice trembling, barely, he coughed. "But I'm here." She helped him sit up, her hands gently brushing his side where a graze bled through his jacket. Jake winced but nodded. "Not deep. I'll live." They stayed there for a while, both catching their breath. The rain slowed. Mist rising from the ground, Kylara finally spoke. "I never thought anyone would fight for me." Jake looked at her, tired eyes soft. "Then it's time someone did." She reached into her cloak and pulled out the pendant, the symbol of her sister. "If we make it to the rebel contact point, they'll help us," she said. "But it's 2 days from here on foot." Jake nodded. "Then we keep moving at first light." They were no longer commander and prisoner, no longer from opposite sides. They were fugitives now, partners in survival, tied together by choices no one else dared to make. As Kylara lay beside Jake beneath the tangled roots, whispered one last thing before sleep took her. "You could have let me die, Jake," replied quietly, eyes already closing. "But then who would warm my soul?" And in that moment, with gunfire far behind and danger still ahead, two broken warriors found something neither of them expected: hope. The sun rose slowly over the alien jungle, casting golden light through mist and twisted trees. Jake and Kylara had walked all night, boots soaked, shoulders bruised, but eyes steady. They were no longer running, they were reaching, searching for something more than safety, hope. Kylara held the pendant tight in her hand, fingers white. From the grip, they were close now. Close to the rebel contact point she had whispered about in the darkness. But Jake had one question left in him. "What if your rebels don't trust me?" he asked, voice low. Kylara looked at him, her eyes calm. "Then I'll make them," she said, "because you earned that by midday." They reached a cliffside marked by a single broken totem, half-buried, covered in vines. Kylara stepped forward and pressed her hand into a small indent on the stone. The ground trembled slightly, and then the totem blinked with a soft green light. Moments later, figures rose from the foliage, weapons drawn, alien rebels and armor of scavenged parts and torn banners. Jake instinctively reached for his sidearm, but Kylara touched his arm. "Don't," she whispered. "They're not enemies." One of the rebels stepped forward, a tall alien woman with one mechanical eye and long braids tied with bones. "Kylara," she said, "you're late." Kylara smiled slightly. "I was busy escaping death." The rebel leader's gaze shifted to Jake, sharp and suspicious, and him. Kylara stood taller. "He's the reason I'm alive. And the reason we have a chance?" The rebels led them through hidden paths and into an underground camp beneath the cliffs. It was more than a hideout. It was a broken city, turned safe. Haven, families, wounded soldiers, children training with wooden sticks. This was what Kylara had dreamed of, an alien place, not ruled by fear, but by survival and unity. Jake looked around, surprised by the humanity in their alien lives. They laughed, they argued, they healed. It felt more alive than the cold metal. Outposts he had served in all his life, inside a war tent lit with blue flames. The rebels gathered. Kylara stood before them. Voice clear and strong, "I bring information," she said. "The location of the neural dome, the core of the enemy's power." Gasps spread across the room. "The dome controls more than war," she continued. "It controls propaganda. Fear and silence. Destroy it, and the people will see the truth." But the rebel council hesitated. "Why now?" One asked, "Why trust a human?" Kylara stepped aside, and Jake came forward, placing the chip on the table. "Because I've seen what your empire does," he said, "and I've seen what she's lost." He paused, then added, "I didn't come to fight with you. I came to end a war." The rebels looked between them, doubt in their eyes, but also something new, curiosity, hope. Finally, the leader spoke. "We attack in 5 days. Under the new moon." Kylara nodded, but her eyes didn't rest easy. She pulled Jake aside after the meeting, voice quiet. "There's something you don't know," she said. "Someone in this camp is a traitor." Jake's expression hardened. "You're sure?" Kylara nodded. "Too many things went wrong. Our escape was too fast. The alert's too sharp. Someone warned them. They didn't have proof. Not yet. But the suspicion weighed on every step. Still, they trained for the mission, side by side, with rebels who eyed Jake with caution but began to see him less like an enemy and more like a fighter. Kylara sparred with him during drills, and though her movements were graceful, there was fire in her strikes. Jake blocked, parried, then smiled through the sweat. "You're holding back," Kylara smirked. "Maybe I don't want to hurt my only friend." Later that night, while others slept, Jake sat alone. Sharpening a blade by the fire, Kylara joined him, sitting close. Warmth between them despite the cold wind. She looked at the fire, then at him. "You still don't know why I said I'd warm your bed," she whispered. Jake raised an eyebrow, unsure what to say. Kylara didn't look away because in my world, sharing warmth is the first act of trust. Before love, before friendship just. Survival? Jake nodded slowly, heart quiet in his chest. "Then I'll share mine too." He said, "No fear, no force, just trust." The fire crackled as they sat together, not touching, but closer than ever, outside. The stars shifted behind. Storm clouds, and within the rebel camp, shadows moved silently. Someone watching, waiting, planning. The betrayal Kylara feared was still coming, but so was a storm neither side would survive alone. The jungle was silent under the new moon. No birds, no wind, just breath and heartbeat. Kylara stood at the edge of the rebel strike team, her violet eyes scanning the horizon. Jake stood beside her, armored, focused, at the chip with the domes. Shutdown code secured in his chest plate. They had one chance. One path into the neural dome deep beneath the enemy city. Past motion sensors, plasma gates, and walls that listened. This was not just a mission. It was the end of everything they knew. Either the war ended tonight or they did. They moved fast, shadows and shadows. Kylara led them through a side tunnel only she knew, but just as they reached the lower corridor, an alarm screamed into the silence. Lights blazed red, and the ground rumbled with activating defenses. Jake cursed. They knew. Kylara spun around, eyes narrowing. Someone told them. Gunfire lit the tunnel behind them. Rebel fighters falling, screaming. trying to push forward. Then they saw her, the traitor, the one-eyed rebel leader, standing beside an enemy general. Kylara froze, heart cracking. She was my mentor, she whispered. Jake pulled her back behind cover. Then we end her lie here. A brutal fight followed. Lasers burned. Grenades shook the dome's inner ring. Jake and Kylara fought. Back to back, her blades flashing. His pistol precise, the rebel traitor fired wild and furious, shouting they'll never accept peace. But Kylara stepped forward. Eyes calm, then die with your lies. And with one silent strike, it was over, inside the dome's core chamber. The console glowed like a heart of fire. Jake inserted the chip, and Kylara entered the shutdown code. Seconds passed like hours, and then the hum of control towers around the planet faded. Cross systems, weapons deactivated, drones powered down, and walls of fear shattered. The neural domla. Brain of tyranny was dead. Outside, skies opened with light. Signals of surrender lit the atmosphere, not just from rebels, but from the enemy army itself, soldiers who had no orders anymore, only questions. The war didn't end with fireworks. It ended with silence, and a sunrise that felt different. Weeks passed. Jake was cleared of treason charges after the truth came out. Kylara's intel, the betrayal, and the dome's fall. Still, he left the military. He had seen too much, lost too much, and earned something more than medal's peace. He moved to the Outer Rim, where survivors rebuilt villages among alien ruins. One day, as he carried supplies through the dusty streets, a figure stepped off a transport ship. Silver skin, violet eyes, a gentle smile. Kylara. He didn't speak, just dropped the box and walked to her. She placed her hand on his chest. Over the scar where the chip had rested, you kept your promise. She whispered, you gave me something to believe in, Jake replied. They lived quietly in a home made of stone and glass, open to the stars. They shared warmth, laughter, and silence. No war. No orders, no chains. Some nights Kylara would wake in fear, eyes wide, breath short, and Jake would hold her hand and whisper, you're safe now. Other nights he would stare at the ceiling, haunted by faces lost, and she would hold him, her voice soft. He'll wrought us peace. In time, they were no longer human and alien. Soldier and weapon, prisoner and commander, they were something more, something rare, two souls stitched together by war, healed by trust and held by quiet love. And every night, as promised, she warmed his bed not with fear, not with duty, but with the kind of warmth that only comes when two hearts survive the fire together.